With the conclusion of Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 and the start of My Hero Academia Season 7 and the looming ReZero Season 3, protagonist and antagonist duos are all the rage right now. And by the rage, I mean that they're standard. These are some of the most discussed duos in online spaces when it comes to characters that are paired with each other, well, next to the ships anyway. But the point is, there are a lot of super popular series currently going on with a hyper-focus on the way these two narrative roles play into each other. Of course, by virtue of discussing fiction, we have to have this disclaimer: this video is going to be highly subjective. If I say something you disagree with, I'm sorry, I guess, but don't take this video as objective fact, unless you want to, of course. I want to put 3 protagonist and antagonist dynamics under the microscope in this video to analyze what I like or dislike about them, and these 3 will be Deku and Shigaraki, which seems especially fitting considering Season 7 started just recently, Itadori and Mahito, which took a lot of people by surprise with their powerful dynamic, and Subaru and Roswaal, a dynamic displayed a few years ago that I think went underappreciated. Obviously, if we're going to talk about a dynamic involving 2 things, we gotta define those things. Protagonists, well, those are the main characters, of course. You could make an entire separate video on what makes a good protagonist, but what I personally like to see in one is how they embody a lot of the story's primary themes in some way. They serve as the poster boy for your core message. Let's take our 3 protagonists here and try to peg what the story is trying to say by examining their circumstances. Izuku Midoriya is from My Hero Academia, if you're somehow unfamiliar. It's a story about if superpowers became standard and society attempted to course correct to accompany that. Midoriya is in big part about the plight of inequality, having grown up in the world of My Hero Academia without being able to interact with its power system, something that sets you apart socially quite a bit. It also highlights the toxic standard that has been put into place by the hero system, this sort of, well, someone will handle it eventually mentality. Which is where Midoriya is set apart from the rest immediately by moving before he could think, despite his powerlessness. His entire role in this story is to introduce his own unique method of heroism and point of view into the system that has fallen into complacency and that has drifted to a point of allowing villainy to exist to justify its own existence and essentially serve as a profit incentive. Itadori Yuji is from Jujutsu Kaisen, which, if you're somehow even more unaware than before, is a story about killing and being killed, with a backdrop of sorcerers using curse energy to kill curses. Itadori got a little silly and ended up ingesting a strange man's finger, which made him a vessel for the most powerful curse in the world. His story largely becomes about finding his own place and role in this inherently unfair world, as the people around him quickly meet their demise and leaving behind unfulfilled desires, and Yuji regularly runs into his own hang-ups with being able to fulfill the role of a Jujutsu sorcerer. Natsuki Subaru is from ReZero. He's a total loser who gets isekai'd into a fantasy world and expects to have everything delivered to him for that reason. But he can't do anything besides die and respawn back in time. His roots as a shut-in lead to him exhibiting toxic obsessive behavior towards the women in his life. It showcases the blinding love he could feel for someone without taking their own feelings and needs into account. It showcases how far someone who feels he has nothing to offer to the world is willing to go to get the ending they desire, even if it means unbelievable amounts of sacrifice. And it shows how much all of that can stem from a primary issue of self-worth. There are a few crossovers with these protagonists in terms of the messages that they are trying to get across. I guess I just like messed up little dudes. I can't help that, sorry. But more importantly, and what I'm trying to focus on for this video, is that these are all protagonists that have a very interesting relationship with their respective antagonists. I could have been you. Deku and Shigaraki are 2 very similar people put on different paths. Yuji and Mahito are 2 existences that feel that they have defined purposes in the world, and Subaru and Roswaal are an antagonistic relationship trying to take advantage of each other's shortcomings. While these protagonists do a spectacular job highlighting the primary themes of the narrative, the story can also use the antagonistic foils to achieve multiple things, like extrapolate further on the darker or more extreme side of these themes, or extrapolate greatly on our understanding of the world building, or also delve far deeper into the circumstances of our characters to understand what makes them tick and how close they were to winding up this way. Working to humanize our cast and let us peer behind the curtain to make them feel more like people rather than purely narrative obstacles. They bring out each other's strengths, their weaknesses, and make us examine the steps they took to get to this point. Deku and Shigaraki fit this motif to a T, both having extremely strong parallel development due to a couple of minor tweaks or divergences throughout early life. They both had ambition of heroism, but one was punished for it. They both were, at first, rejected and isolated, but slowly formed their own support system. They both grew into their own visions of heroism and villainy entirely independent of each other, both having mentors that fall in a climactic battle that push them into the forefront and basically make them develop ideologies or ways to differ their interpretation of their respective roles. I mean, shit man, they both even got red shoes. That's crazy. I think this parallel development and them as narrative foils are both incredibly interesting, but this dynamic is also lacking in an important department, and that's a personal connection. Sure, the things they embody are completely opposite, but besides 2 on-screen interactions, one of them being 6 real-life years ago in anime form, Deku and Shigaraki never have a conversation. They both dislike each other because they are on enemy teams, but we never really get to feel an actual rivalry or ideological conflict, the extent being the two action figures slamming into each other. If you're into that, that's cool, but I also have to think that most people would agree that these two characters having such a similar upbringing and sometimes exact same scenes would feel way more potent with them actually having any disagreement or rapport at all. I'm not going to say that they have to sit around a desk and talk doing a podcast. It feels like they were never given the chance to form their own antagonistic relationship, simply fighting because, well, that's what they do. And this in itself could be used to form a commentary about heroes and villains, but that's not really what's utilized. Deku ends up wanting to save the crying boy inside of Shigaraki, and I like that quite a bit, but imagine how much more weighty that decision would feel both in concept and execution if Deku was given the opportunity to talk with Shigaraki, verbally dissect his upbringing, for them to clash on ideas of society, for Deku to vent his frustration of the harm Shigaraki said to his friends, for Shigaraki to attack Deku for being a pawn of the status quo, but for Deku to still decide to save Shigaraki nonetheless. This is when Yuji and Mahito come in. Though they don't necessarily have similar upbringings, they have similar roles, and Yuji and Mahito's conflict culminates in the acceptance of that fact. Mahito talks big game about being a curse and existence that kills because that's what it was put here to do, and for no other ideological reason. He asks Yuji how many curses he's killed, not because he's actually curious, but because, of course, Yuji doesn't have an answer, just like Mahito wouldn't have one for his killing of human beings. This relationship and dialogue the two characters get to have over the course of Jujutsu Kaisen is what makes Yuji solidify and come to his own conclusion about his role in Jujutsu society. He forces Yuji to look at life from Mahito's perspective when he hits him with the "I'm you" comment. This comment may feel asinine at first glance because, actually they are not the same people, but also because the things that they are doing and are fighting for are completely different. But Mahito kills for the sake of killing because his role in this war is to kill. And Yuji saves people without a second thought because his role in this is to kill curses and save humans. What Mahito was doing was acting purely according to his nature as a curse, and directly contributed to the unfairness of the world. Despite being so young, Mahito became extremely powerful in a short amount of time, and robbed us of fan-favorite characters reminding us of this harsh reality of Jujutsu society. Because they get to have an actual relationship, actual dialogues, and actual encounters, their clashing ideals in battle to see which one of them gets to exist 100 years from now hits that much harder. And that's the aspect of Deku and Shigaraki that ultimately falls flat to me, even if I enjoy the set dressing of their dynamic. Yuji and Mahito's final fight is incredibly powerful, and even if I'm not much of a JJK enjoyer, it remains as one of my favorite fights in shonen. These protagonist and antagonist foils can also be used to bring out the flaws in these characters, like with Subaru and Roswaal. Subaru is not initially known for being normal and well-adjusted. He is entitled, controlling, and rejects other people's agency as he tramples on the women in his life for his own sake. Subaru isn't a bad guy. He is just the product of social isolation and a lack of emotional maturation. His main conflict with his love interest was because no matter how many times she asked him not to do something, he would do it anyway because it was for her own good, and other routine acts of disrespect, so it's fitting for his first major antagonist to be one whose primary goal is to follow a book that has predestined fate inscribed inside of it. The implication that everything in this world is predetermined, and one's choices do not matter, as Roswaal pushes towards this book's conclusion, all for the sake of the woman he loves. Their buildup of conflict leads to Roswaal calling out Subaru directly, as someone who understands how much one must sacrifice to help the person they love, an intrinsic suffering that leaks the two characters innately. As Roswaal pursues the return of his teacher, he continually reincarnates himself into the vessels of his children so he can keep chasing after that dream, and as Subaru wants to help Emilia become the king of Lagunica, he continually dies and resets to that end. It's this very meddling of the rules of the world that brings Subaru and Roswaal together, as just like Mahito and Yuji, Subaru is forced to confront how similar he is to Roswaal. This is hammered home in one loop where Roswaal marches to his death towards the Great Rabbit knowing full well that Subaru will reset the world, and in that loop, Roswaal will continue on. This is to highlight how Subaru treats his power of return by death in this arc, as he gets comfortable with the concept of using throwaway lives because he'll just come back anyway, and he just uses every life with the expectation of dying at the end to help get out of the situation and put everything back on track, a dead end that Roswaal had pushed Subaru into to make him give up on everything but Emilia, just like Roswaal has done with Echidna. What makes Subaru have his own "I'm you" realization is a moment when he's speaking with Emilia, and she lets him know that despite his lack of involvement, she has still been doing things on her own, and that she doesn't want him to do everything in his place. It's a simple statement, but it made everything come crashing down for Subaru. What he had been doing this whole time is assuming that he is the only person moving the pieces on the board, that surely Emilia would be up to nothing, and how he felt, for some reason, an innate responsibility to do everything for her, despite her, frankly, being a more capable person than he is. Just like Roswaal, Subaru was assuming that Emilia could do nothing on her own, and that he could simply handle all of it for her. This revelation also comes in the arc where we see both Subaru and Roswaal's self-worth at all-time lows, with Subaru throwing his life away to inch the situation along, and with Roswaal's backstory and his initial grooming, which informs their relationship even more heavily and ties even more strongly into ReZero's self-worth messaging. What is unlike Mahito and Yuji, and this is not a criticism, just a different approach, is that Subaru does not embrace this similarity to Roswaal to find strength, but his growth comes from seeing these similarities to his enemies and completely rejecting them, with Roswaal's downfall being Subaru's bonds that would be deemed insignificant in the grand scheme. ReZero is a story so closely intertwined with concepts of heroism, self-love, and respect, and granting people their own autonomy, and this conflict between the man who dies repeatedly to get the future he desires and the man who reincarnates to achieve his end goal grasps all of this so perfectly. These are the things that I find make these dynamics so strong, even if I have issues with Deku and Shigaraki, and this wasn't to mention the future manga revelations. How well they play off of their character traits, their goals, the themes that the story is trying to deliver, and so on and so on. I hope I was able to paint a picture as to why I find these characters so fun. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe for the funny YouTube algorithm. You can also become a YouTube member, which gives you access to behind-the-scenes content, a badge on comments and livestream chats, as well as the use of emotes and videos before their actual release. You can also check the description for socials like Twitter, where I'm objectively correct all the time, and Discord, where we talk about ReZero, My Hero Academia, Jujutsu Kaisen, and stuff like that. That's about it though. Thank you for watching. See ya.